Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today on this online support event for teachers offering design as an option in the BTEC Tech Award in Performing Arts. My name is Paul Webster and I am the Subject Advisor for Pearson's Drama and Performing Arts qualifications. I'm hoping that at some point today the Senior Standards Verifier for Production Arts, Mark Edgington, is going to be joining us as well. So in the session today, we're going to look at a step-by-step guide to supporting students who wants to focus on design in one or more of the three components of the Tech Award. We'll be looking at the requirements for a design student in the three components, hopefully able to answer all the questions that you've submitted to us regarding the support for design students, and have a look at some useful websites and resources that provide examples of work by professional designers, can provide guidance for students, etc. So the first thing we'll do is have a look at a step-by-step guide. Hopefully this will be as clear as possible for you. But if you want to ask any questions as we go through, just type them into the chat box. Firstly, we're going to begin with the context of the design brief. Now, when we're doing this, when we're going through this step-by-step guide, these approaches can be applied to both components 2 and 3, and they can inform the research and analysis that students undertake into a role of a designer in component 1. So just so you're clear about how these can be applied. So we begin with the context of the design brief, and usually, as you know, in professional productions, the director or choreographer or musical director will share their vision for the production with the creative team. There are those exceptions, of course, where the collaborative process will result in a shared vision, but we're just going to go with the most popular and recognized approach. So we're looking conceptually and we're also looking practically. And the first thing is about the conceptual, and this can include the overarching idea for the production, what the audience will experience, the context of the audience invited to experience the work. So who are they? Where are they coming from? Are they paying, etc.? Are they a particular age group, etc.? How the production will look and sound overall, and any particular themes that are being highlighted. The other key element are the practical elements of the brief. So in other words, the time scale involved in putting the show together, the length of the performance itself, is it 5 minutes, is it 5.5 hours, the length of the run of the production, is it a one-off, is it over a week, is it a 6-week run, the budget allocated to the particular elements of the production, the location of the production, the audience capacity, and the key performance elements such as the number of performers. Now, this is all general stuff. This is Felicity's just asked, has this breakdown of information been out long? Well, it's always this is just general in terms of this is what any student who is involved in a production would need to know. This is what any professional performer or designer would also need to know. Laura's asked, what component is this for? So as I said a couple of minutes ago, this is for can be applied in all three components, mainly components 2 and 3 with all this information, because as you know, in component 3, you don't have to write a brief. We provide some of this information for you, and then you and the students will determine the rest of it. So this is just a general overview of the type of information a director, choreographer, or producer, if they're in this particular role, will share with the key creatives involved in the work. So in terms of applying this in component 1, this information is that it can be found out through resources released by the theatre who produce the work, for example, or by the performance company themselves. hopefully you're able to find out this information, and some of it is obvious because all you need to do is look at the facts around the production or the productions that you're looking at to see how long they were on for. Did they have a West End run? Was it extended? Was it a touring production? Was it a one-off that was provided with a TV tie-in? There's lots of things that you can find out. Sometimes it's really difficult to get hold of all the information, so it's all right if you use a comparable production and use the information from that. In component 2, this information could be put in the assignment brief, or more likely it would be in a production meeting, for example, where you gather everybody together, you gather all the designers and all the key creatives and say, this is what we're doing, this is how long we've got, how people are going to be involved and what they're going to do. In component 3, as I said, we provide a lot of this information in the task itself. There is then the additional information that you and the students are going to determine, i.e. most of the practical elements. So the key facts in the component 2 assignment brief should be the date of the performance or performances, the time scale for the process of creating the work, and hopefully you can put in the key deadlines. So when are the dress and tech rehearsals? You will be including the overarching concept because that's what you do in an assignment brief about you're putting on this show for this particular reason. You may include information about the audience type, and you may include the roles available to the students. So, in a moment, we're going to have a look at an example of a brief, so to make it clearer for you. Additional information about the conceptual or practical elements can be in production meetings, and the benefit of a production meeting is that the students have the opportunity to ask questions and to dig deeper into what they're being asked to do and what this context is. Thereby, they're analysing the context and developing a deeper understanding of what the requirements are. So from the get-go, you're giving them the opportunity to get involved and to discuss things and not just be told what to do. So the students need to be very clear from the start, and we're talking about the design students here, by the way, of what the boundaries are as well. So what they can do, but what also they're not allowed to do. So what as a centre can you offer them? Can the design, for instance, be realised by the student, or can it be by somebody else? Will the students have access to materials and facilities and equipment that would allow them to realise their work? Do you have the staff? Do you have budget? What do you have? So you can still offer design if you have hardly any budget and you have hardly, you don't have many good facilities and you don't have the staff. You can still do it. It's just going to involve a lot of careful planning and ways around it. And it may be that you just go, actually, I can offer the key areas in design. You can do set and you can do costume. Potentially you could do sound. But as for the other things, we just don't have the opportunity to do it. So I think it's just about being honest with yourself and your students about what is actually going to be available to do, especially in component 2. As I said before, in components 1 and 3, students don't have to have their design work realised. Obviously, in component 1, they don't have to do any design work, their own design work at all. In component 3, the students will present their design ideas to camera. The work doesn't have to be realised. In component 2, the students should be given the opportunity to have whole or part of their design realised, either by themselves or looking at others, e.g. students in the art and design department of your centre. So let's have a look now at an assignment brief. And this is one I've put together, and what I'm going to do is once this is signed off by our BTEC assessment team, get this released. I've also done one for component 1 as well. So what you can see here, I've just highlighted a couple of bits. So this first bit here is about the deadlines. So stating from the start when things are going to have to be ready for. You might want to put in another one there, which is kind of like a midpoint review or something like that, but that's entirely up to you. So you could also put in here as well the presentation of the completed design. So what we've got is in this one I've integrated both the requirements for performers and for designers. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. It's just that I've put it here just so that you can see that there is the parity between them and they're all working towards the same thing. So they've applied for a role in the local youth performance company as either a performer or designer. You can see there the performers requirements. That's just pretty straightforward. For the designers, you've been asked to prepare a pitch presentation lasting 3 to 5 minutes and to produce a prototype design. You can design for one of the following, and there are all 7 that we have listed in the specification. The youth performance company has indicated they'd like to know you can cope with demands of professional work, and therefore your design should be developed from professional repertoire and the requirements of a professional production. We're going to come on to that in a little while about this idea of the professional repertoire, so try not to worry about that too much at the moment. There's probably some of you typing the questions now, oh my god, do they need to just copy what already exists? That's not the point of this, and so I'll explain in a few moments. So moving on through the brief, you've got one task, you've got task 1 there, you've got the performers doing their bits, and then for the designers, it's about developing their skills in their particular area, using their logbook effectively to capture those moments when they are making progress. Moving through, we get to task 2, where the performers are doing rehearsal and performance of a piece of professional rep. The designers are going to do the pitch, which we've already talked about, and then they're going to apply the skills and techniques in terms of realizing or supporting those who will be realizing it for them. So that is the brief. Task 3 is the logbook, and it's 3 milestone points throughout the assessment period that they have to kind of make clear. So they can do an ongoing logbook if they want to, but that for assessment purposes, it's 3 milestone points that we've put in here. So that will be the same for performers and for designers. So I hope that's clear for you. Hope that works. Just a couple of questions that have come through. Amy, will a copy of the brief be released? Yes, it will, Amy. I just said needs to get signed off, and then I've got this one and one for component 1 as well. What other questions have we got? James has asked if I don't have any acting students, does the performance still need to be created for C3? Yeah, we need to talk about that, James. I think you are from the centre where you don't have any performance students. That's right, isn't it? So we'll talk about it later, or we can catch up on that about how best you can get them to do this work. In terms of, I will go through the rest of the questions in a moment, but in terms of what we're looking at here, and in terms of the application, so we've talked about that and how it can be applied in terms of this brief. So let's move on now to step 2, which is scoping and research. And what we have here is the second part of the design process. If you have been, studied as a designer, you'll know that I think there are 11. But for the purposes of this, like I say, 11 stages, but for the purposes of this, we've cut it down to 6. So just to make it clearer and much more straightforward. But as we go through this, hopefully it will all make sense. So once the student has decided on the design role to be undertaken, they need to undertake research into their area of design in the context of the brief, not just a general research activity, but really specific to the requirements of the brief. I would suggest it's very important that before you do any assessment, that the students have had the opportunity to try out this step-by-step process, so that they understand that they can focus their research and scoping on relevant articles, images, interviews, recordings, live examples, etc., rather than trying to gather as much information as they can from every possible source about every possible design. There is no requirement for a design student to submit hundreds of images and pages of research when the majority of it is likely to either be redundant or irrelevant in the context of the brief given. This is not about quantity. So it may be that you work along the lines of, as this part of the process, that the students gather between 10 to 20 images. I'm not saying that it's, oh my God, if they do 21, then they're going to fail, or if they only hand in 9, then they're going to fail. It's a rough idea of what you should be aiming towards and what you should be encouraging them to do. It may be that they get kind of 5 to 10 minutes worth of recordings from various different sources. They've written notes, which could be 200 words, it could be 500 words, but it's this idea that they are looking for stuff and they're actively participating. And if you can get them to do that, then job done. That's the way to direct them. So as an example, the performance students are going to recreate an extract from Matthew Bourne's Swan Lake. And if a student was a costume designer was working with those students, they might choose to look for examples of the costumes used in various previous productions of the work, so they get an idea of how others have approached it. They may choose to look at traditional ballet costumes. They may want to refer to images or recordings of their own observations of real swans, for example, in terms of the movement, in terms of the posture, the colour, the texture of feathers. It may be that they want to research into other artistic representations of swans, like the Björk Oscar night dress, which I know it sounds quite ridiculous, but it was a fascinating use of costume, quite disturbing and shocking, but you could definitely recognize that at one point it was a swan. The students can present their research findings in a folder. It could be a hard copy, it could be an e-version, it could be a large poster that they put together like an A1 poster, it could be a sketchbook that's like an A5 one that they've just stuck things into. There's lots of different ways of doing it, and it's about quality, not quantity, of the findings that count. And I would say that if you don't have any idea at all about what a sketchbook should look like or how to do this, go and speak to your art department and ask to look at some examples of their work, because that's exactly what the design students are doing. They're working in a very similar way to the students who are doing art and design. Your students can create a mood board, a thought shower, anything that can demonstrate the range of findings. They could head it with a theme. It could be like Victorian females or feathers or 50 Shades of White, whatever you would want it to be. But it's important that the students are given the opportunity to go out, to find some interesting images and ideas, and that they collate them and bring them all back and share them with you. At that point, we move to step 3, which is the initial responses and the selection of ideas. Felicity's just asked, has this step-by-step guide only just come out? Felicity, this step-by-step guide has always existed. This is what the design process is. I thought it would be a good idea to just contextualize this in terms of students doing design for performing arts, because I get lots of questions from teachers saying, I've never taught design before. I've got some students who want to do design. Can you help me? So I thought this would be a good idea. If your students haven't done this as part of their design process, it would be interesting to know what they have done, because this is the design process. This isn't on the website because I've only this is it now. We're going through it and then I'll release it So once the research has undertaken, the student will need to make some decisions about their design. With the design brief underpinning everything they do, the students will use their research findings to further develop their initial response. So students are finding images and ideas now to capture what they want to achieve, and this is really their first attempt at showing their idea in anything other than words. They could sketch their ideas, for example, if they can, but if they don't have any drawing skills, that's fine. They don't have to. They could make a photo montage, so they can use existing images, cut and paste them and stick them all together. Or they could have access to Photoshop. If they've got access to Photoshop, then they could put that together something more sophisticated. They can make declarations in their sketchbook or on A4 sheets about their ideas that state the element and the purpose of what they're doing. So, as an example, the performance students are going to do an extract from Mary Poppins, the musical, and the extract is Feed the Birds. And so they're going to do like the scene before it, then the song itself, and then part of the scene after it. So it's bedroom, St. Paul's, London area, that's bedroom again. So the lighting designer could be doing find images of Mary Poppins and the original film, and then the follow-up version and the stage version as well. But they could also think about how they want to elevate this and make it theirs. So they start to find images of children in particular contexts, of different types of children's bedrooms, of St. Paul from St. Paul's Cathedral and the dome from different angles, the gardens that surround it, images of birds, like of pigeons, it might be silhouettes of birds, the London skyline, storm clouds, black cabs, umbrellas, rain. I'm freestyling here, but I hope you can see what I mean, that idea of you have a starting point and then they just start to go off and collate these ideas and run with them and see what they can come up with. Michelle has asked, could there be audio recordings for sound candidates? Yes, Michelle, of course, yes. So if your sound designers are finding things, ready-made recordings of things, so like the BBC sound effects CDs, that they can use those. Or it could be that they're making their own recordings, they're going out and recording things themselves. So what I'd like to show you now is an intentions template. Now, there's a couple of worried people in the event, and I don't want you to worry anymore. Please don't, Felicity and Stephanie. So these, I'm trying to help you now with these ideas. And if you've had students who've done design already and they haven't done these things, it's not necessarily that they've failed. It's just that this is a way to help you, really, and it can help you in the future, and it can help anybody else who needs this. So you can ignore this if you want. This is just my experience as a designer, a teaching design, that this is what has worked in the past and can work for you. So this is an intentions template, and this is a really useful way of getting them to make decisions and collate their ideas and give them a really focused direction of where they're going to go to. So the information on this that you can see is basically what was given to them on the brief and what they would have found out at a production meeting with you, with the other designers, etc. So everything underlined is the bit that's filled in by the student. So my role is lighting designer for a performance of Feed the Birds. There will be X number of performances taking place on these 2 dates and the location of them. They haven't mentioned the audience, and I presumed that's my fault, but the audience will be an invited audience. The director's intention is to show the audience Mary singing the song in the children's bedroom and outside St. Paul's Cathedral, and present Mary as a kind and compassionate human. Fourth point, I'm going to interpret this, i.e. what the director's intention is by using projections to show the location. Now, in this, it's the lighting designer, and the lighting designer, as you can probably see, is merging a bit with the set designer, and will also be merging a bit with the props design, because that's just the nature of the work that they're doing here. So the student will be doing lighting, as in spots and Fresnels and general washes, etc., etc., but is also going to be incorporating some projections, and the lighting designer has to be involved in it, because they have to make sure that the projections can be seen whilst Mary and the children are also lit downstage. So there's, there are a few things going on here for the lighting designer. They're going to work with the following people: the director, the choreographer, 3 performers, sound designer, and makeup designer. They'll be creating designs for the bedroom, in which they're going to project the wardrobe, etc., and London images of pigeons and the area around the cathedral. And the student has said, I need to make sure that, and as I've just said, Mary's well lit so the audience can see both the performers and the projections. I hope we're all following so far, and this is all right. Please say if I'm going too fast, but I'm just really hoping that these are stimulating ideas for you, and you're getting some good ideas for yourself. So the student has done this sheet, and they've said what their intentions are, and now they're going to go and go on to do the design and hopefully be able to realize it themselves. So they've got their clear statement of intent and the objectives of what they're going to do. The student is now, the design student will now need to work with the performers, or if you don't have any performers, with people standing in for performers, to understand the interpretation, to understand how the space is being used and the parameters of the task. Now, this is the same for all 7 design elements. It's the same principle. It's going to be difficult for students to design something and test it and make sure it works if they've not got access to performers and other students who are going to help them be able to do this. So they have to have a working relationship with the performers and the director choreographer, plus any other designers who are working on this for obvious reasons around suitability, comparability. Design students, when they get into it and given the opportunity, especially working on Feed the Birds, they can begin to reflect each other's work in what they're doing. They can begin to consider the choice of colours and being sympathetic to each other. So the costume designer being sympathetic with the lighting, etc. And the lighting designer has to see what the costume designer is coming up with to make sure that the lighting is going to pick up the key elements of the costume, whatever themes, whatever objectives are being, expressed through the costume design. There's a lot for you to do as a teacher. You know that already. It's a brilliant yet crazy job that you have. And when you take on design students as well, there is so much to consider. You've got your directorial choreographic responsibilities. You've got your stage management responsibilities, unless you have the luxury of sharing those with others. And then you've got the managing the development of multiple designers. I think that if you're comfortable enough to be able to do it and you like a challenge, then go for it. I would say that if you've never taught design before and you're having to do all these different things, you just need to be really careful about not giving yourself too much to do and too much to manage. So you need to arrange regular meetings with the production team, and then allowing the students to go in at various points to work with the with the performers in their rehearsal. if for instance you get the designers to come into a rehearsal and they're just there to observe, they're not there to do anything, it can be really useful because they can see the demands of the performance on the performers. This is going to be really useful if they're designing costume, if they're designing masks or makeup, in terms of how restricted they are by the set, the use of stage furniture. There's so many things that is going to be really useful for the design students to see the performers in practice. Encourage them to ask questions, encourage them to keep their own notes and sketches, for them to take responsibility for this. Because if you do a trial of this, a trial run before any assessment starts, they can get things wrong, they can try things out. When they do the actual assessment, they should be able to run with it. So that would be my advice. In terms of step 4, this is the development of ideas, testing them out and evaluating their success and failures. Now, this is really important to do, that students don't just design as out of context, that they are able to just try some ideas out and make things, or get others to make them, just to see what they're like, because otherwise it's all conceptual, and there has to be that practical input and idea generation if they are going to develop as designers. So these are just some examples, and again, don't let this freak you out, but this is about the type of tasks that a design student could do as part of their design process that will allow them to develop their ideas further and see what they're doing. So again, using the feed the birds idea, let's have a look at what the different designers could do. So firstly, we've got costume, and they try some different materials. Swatches are, just the little offcuts of material. So they're trying these out because they're looking at not only what it's like in terms of being able to wear a coat made of a particular material, but also, does it irritate the performer's skin? Can they move in it? Blah, blah, blah. It may be that ready-made costumes are altered or adjusted so that it's the coat that they've got is too big, so they take the hems up. The pleats are sewn into a skirt. It may be that original buttons are removed and new ones are put in because of the particular effect that the costume designer wants to have, or working with the lighting designer to see how that would picking up the glinting of the buttons under the lights. For set design, students could experiment with painting the flats, as in those big boards that are used on stage, using different paints to see what effect it has. Can the audience understand what's being represented? How is it when the lights are shown? What happens when the performers are in front? Can you still see what's happening? Stage furniture, what impact does that have? It may be that they build a section of the environment, e.g. a corner wall, and it's made from polystyrene or from hardboard. It may be that working with students in the design area of your centre can help with that. It may be possible. For props, finding a ready-made basket and adding fake flowers, creating Mary's bottomless bag by adapting a ready-made bag, making shadow puppets of birds that can be operated by the performers. For lighting, it could be that the projections of bird flight are created using software like Animaker or Pencil 2D. I mean, these are just simple software, free software that you can download off the interweb. They could be experimented with backlighting of gauze and using shadow puppets or gobos. For sound, might be finding and recording their own bird song. It might be experimenting with speaker placement in the performance space. For particular effects, it may be that it's about they want to try to capture the flight of the birds as they move around the room. So again, just this idea of testing ideas out and not just going, this is what I want to do. I want bird song here. And then never hearing the bird song, never finding it, never understanding what it's like to have bird song under underpinning the vocal performance, about volume levels and stuff. It's these really simple things. This is what I mean about experimentation and testing things out. For makeup and hair, it could be that there's makeup tests on the performers, again for about allergies, etc., but also about experimenting with how to age a performer sympathetically. Obviously, your students will be young, and Mary Poppins isn't that young, and so it's what can be done to age the performer, finding a wig and hat combination that looks realistic and captures the period. Again, just another idea of approaches. For masks, experimenting with different techniques in making masks of birds. So mod rock, papier-mâché, paper and tape, etc. And then testing them out with the performers. So how comfortable are they? Are they able to move? Are they able to still use their voices? So a few ideas there about what they could do. Students should test their prototypes, their experiments on either performers or teachers or on each other. They can make notes on what's working or not. They're making decisions. You can tell them how you feel from your position as a director, from your position of wearing one of the masks that they've made you, but you can't tell them what to do. So they want the response, they want to know what it's like, then they make a decision about what to do next. And as you know, sometimes getting it wrong can lead to wonderful, enlightening moments. So those are my suggestions. A couple of questions just before we move on to step 5. Ben's asked, in component 2, can students design several elements which might complement each other to help support a more thoroughly realized outcome, i.e. props and costume pieces? Yes, so in those examples, Ben, I was just going through, I think you can see that that's already happening, that if a student potentially is doing costume, but may also think about and even design the hair and the makeup that goes along with it, the student who's doing the lighting has also suddenly started to think about set and how projection is more to do with set than it is with lighting. And so you've got all these things where they can be amalgamated. And what I would say to you is the students who are performing can go, I'm an actor, I'm a dancer, I'm a musical theatre performer. They'll still end up kind of integrating different skills, and sometimes the acting student who might just burst into song or might do some physicality in it, which is physical theatre but with some dance elements in. And so what I'm trying to say by that is they'll still call themselves an actor. So in this, the designer, just not to put too much pressure on them, I would say, you just go with the lighting designer. If they end up then incorporating those different combinations, then that's brilliant. And yeah, you're right. So you've said, if I write the combinations of the brief, that might encourage them to stretch their portfolios. Go for it. I mean, why not? It's not. I would just say that don't push them too far, because obviously the highest grade that they can get is a level 2 distinction. And if your students are doing level 3 work, then that is absolutely brilliant, but it's not a requirement. So they might do the level 2 distinction work in just one area, and by pushing them, it may be that they can't match it in all of them. That's all I'm saying. Don't be too hard on them when you're assessing them. Step 5 is presenting the final design. So the students have tested things out. They've got they're ready to go. This is what they want to do. So they kind of put that final thing together, that kind of pitch presentation together for you before it goes on to be realised. So I mean, there's different ways of doing this, and it might be, for example, that the performers are they're going to do the performance in your main space. And outside there's a little foyer, or there's a little bit where things can be displayed before the audience come in. So it might be that your design students put together this presentation as a almost like an exhibition that the audience can have a look at before they go in to see the work of the process that they've been through. It kind of like can elevate the design student as well, to show, look how much I didn't just come up with this idea, look at everything I've been through and look at my creativity. You know, it can be a very positive thing. It could be a private presentation if they feel embarrassed or ashamed, or they just don't feel comfortable in presenting in front of lots of people. Because remember that in this context, the students are assessed on the content. If they aren't very comfortable speaking, you can't mark them down for that. It's about the content. It's not about their presentation skills. Another way to do it is they could do like an e-gallery, something online that can be seen, and they don't necessarily have to present it. So the final design, again, please don't get freaked out. There's just a list of things that I was going through that potentially you can use or adapt or whatever. So students should consider that in this final design that they're presenting to you, a mood board, sketches, illustrations, photos. A mood board might include all of those in one thing. They may not be comfortable sketching themselves, so again, as I said before, it's not a requirement as such. They've got examples of materials that they've used, the swatches, the colour charts, etc., that they have that they present to you. There are examples of experimentation that they've done, i.e., they did some measuring of the performers in the space. So there's some photos of that. There's examples of the prototypes, e.g. A model box, a maquette, so a to scale model version of the costume design, etc., a recording of what they're doing. And then what I've done here is I've just, again, divided it up into, for each area. So for costume, at least one role or character in the production. It can have hair and makeup and mask if appropriate. A costume plot or list of costumes, accessories worn by the performers is also going to be standard. It's what you would expect to. It's what you'd expect to do. For set, drawings of the final design, a ground plan of the performance space, including entrances and exits, audience positioning, stage furniture, a model box. I've not even written it there, but a model box is, and it doesn't have to be like the one that I showed you on that previous slide, wherever that one is. It doesn't have to be as sophisticated as that. It can be very, very basic, but it's really just the students demonstrating. I mean, when I first learned how to do a model box, we just got a cardboard box, cut it in half, and then used white card that we cut into strips to create our shapes and environments. It really was, it's really simple. So again, don't think that they have to do an incredibly sophisticated model box, but at the same time, encourage them, get them to do these things, get them to look at other people's things and go, that's what you're aiming for, go for it. Lighting design, final lighting design incorporating grid plan and a lantern schedule for at least 4 different lighting states. I mean, again, this is just an average. And it's also what's in the GCSE spec, so that's why I've included it here. Again, it might be, oh, we've only got 2, or we've got 17 lighting states. This is just rough, yeah. This is just a guidance document. So there's a lighting plot or cue sheet, which is going to be very useful for the lighting operator, because they will need to know when their cues are and what the cues are exactly. For sound, a source sheet showing for sound cues, original, live or found sounds, effects, a cue sheet showing the source, the order, the length, etc. And obviously, if they've got the sounds recorded, then they submit that somehow. Makeup and hair, final hair and or makeup designs for at least 1 character, and then a list of the requirements for each performer. Props, final design drawings for 2 props, list of prop requirements. And this obviously would be for the stage manager and the for laying it out on the table, backstage, etc., all that kind of stuff that needs to be considered. And then the mask is a mask designed for at least one role character in the production. So, just going back to that a moment. It needs to be really clear to your students that what they do for this bit in an ideal situation would then be handed over to someone else to realise if they're not going to do it. So it needs to be really clear about what the exact requirements are. And I would like to use a ridiculous bake-off comparison at this point, which is, if you've ever seen Bake Off and the technical challenge, you will know that the information that's given by the judge is sparse and is really potentially, there are lots of gaps, and therefore the bakers have to make decisions. What you don't want to happen is that the makers in this context have to make decisions because the designer hasn't thought about them or hasn't included them. So try to sell it to your students in that way. Try to think of it in that way yourself. The student needs to make clear guidance on what the design is, and they just need to make sure that everybody who reads it and hears it will understand. Anne-Marie, could they write up their presentation speech and have it read out by someone else? Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, it's their content. It's just about proving that it's their content. So as long as you can do that, then it shouldn't be an issue. The final part is a realization, and as we said before, it's just component 2 where it needs to be realized. If the student is able to do it themselves, that's brilliant. It doesn't have to be the whole design as well. It could be part of it, because they could be incredibly ambitious, and it could just be one bit that they do. So so don't worry if they've done a massive gargantuan set. I mean, they shouldn't have done, because you should have set the parameters in the first place. But sometimes, you know, with costume design, it may be that they're just able to make the top part of it and not find the hat or the shoes, etc. Felicity, if you look in the specification, it says that it must be realized. It's on. I'll get it in a moment and show you. It's in there. I mean, it does say it, because I should know, because I helped develop the specification. So you have to have it realized. So that's it for the step-by-step guide. The realization will obviously be recorded somehow. So if you do have performance students, then it will be part of their performance. If not, then it will be through you taking photos, filming it, etc. The student walking around it saying, this is the set design that I've created. I've just done part of it. I've done the doorway. I've done the 2 walls either side of the doorway. These are the decisions that I've made, etc. Okay, so it's 10:02. We've got a couple of FAQs that you sent in. So here we go. So is there any part of the course for design that has to be performance by the design student? No. So a design student can just design all the way through with never having to do any performance. I'd like clarification on the expected depth of knowledge the students are required to have and the level of resources centres are expected to have available. I hope that through what we've just looked at, that's become a lot clearer for you now. If it hasn't, then please let me know. But I'm hoping that you now understand that students can go pretty deep into this and can produce a lot of exciting, interesting work. But it was still level 2. And we have to remember that your students may do incredible things and surpass level 2 completely, but that doesn't mean that then brings everything else down. Alice has asked, when realizing the design, lighting, they could work with the lighting technician and tell them what the lighting is and not physically program the lighting. Yeah, so yes, Alice, exactly. They don't have to do the programming if they can't do it or they don't know how to do it and they're not being assessed on doing that programming. They can have that dialogue with the lighting technician. Absolutely. Yeah, great suggestion. Oh, Laura. Sounds a bit stroppy, Laura. My question from the start has not been answered. I'm sorry. How can we incorporate practical making into component one? Well, let's have a look at this now, because I think I might have. Sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to call you stroppy. I think do I answer that one? No, maybe I don't. So in component one, in the same way that you could get the performance students to recreate some scenes. You could also do similar with the designers in the sense that I suppose it depends on the design element that's being looked at. But the thing for me about component one is if I were teaching it, I would make it as practical as I possibly could. Obviously, they need to know the information about how things are made, but I would get them doing them. I would get the students purely because if you gave your students an incredibly hard extract from from anything, it's so hard, right? And say for example it was like a Pina Bausch thing, and with Pina Bausch you've got the costume, you've got the lighting, you've got the set, you've got everything, you've got water on the floor, you've also got this incredibly passionate, difficult kind of choreography that they have to do. You get the students to try it out and they realize by trying it out how difficult and ridiculous the training required to be able to get to that standard, be able to perform that 8 times a week, and how it's like another world. It's that type of learning that can be so crucial because they just go, oh my God, that's ridiculous. That's so hard. I'd never be able to do that. That's why they've been working in that company for 20 years, blah, blah, blah. So I would say, select some extracts, try them out, see how they feel, see how difficult it is for them. It's not about putting them off. It's about making them realize how professionals work and how difficult the professional's job is, and they make it look so easy. In component one, students need to focus on do students need to focus on a different design element for each production, or can they compare and contrast the use of one design element across 3 productions? They can focus on one design element in detail and how that designer would work with other creatives. That's my answer. You can do any. You can just focus on one. You can do different ones. There's no requirement to do a comparison and contrasting for assessment purposes, although it can be really useful for the student to understand the different approaches. Component 2, strategies for teaching when the majority of students are acting. Well, as I said before, like it requires some organization from you to make sure that you've got specific tasks that you can give to the designers whilst the performers are rehearsing and blocking and doing the things that they're doing. So as you can see, I'm hoping now we've been through that step-by-step process that you can see that they can be busy all the time and there's always things for them to do. So fingers crossed that it's been of some help for you today. How do you evidence design for component 2? Can you provide an assignment brief? So yes, so I've shown you that today. I'll release it as soon as possible with one for component 1 as well. We've also got the assignment check-in service where you can send in your ideas. So in terms of reality of recreating rep, we spoke about this earlier. So acting and musical theatre students have existing rep in the shape of scripts and scores. Designers, so basically what I'm saying is that the designer can work in the same way the actors and the musical theatre students do, and if they have a script and a score, they can respond to it because that's the existing material. For dancers, they have recordings. So what the designer can do for with working with dancers is they can emulate what they see on the recording, or they have just a bit more flexibility and take some and be basically creative, and come up with their own ideas. So it's only really the dance students that have to emulate as much as possible as what they see. Design students working with dance students have some flexibility, as we looked at before with Swan Lake. I have approximately 12 lighting or sound design students. Can they work in teams, or would they have to perform individual design tasks with their own performance team? My response is, if you can guarantee that each individual student in a peer group is getting the opportunity to meet each stage of the step-by-step process, then go ahead. It will work better in some design areas than others. It's probably more beneficial for students to learn together before assessment and then work independently with their performance team. I'm aware of the time, ladies and gentlemen. It's 5 to already. This has flown by. In component 3, students are going to be referring to the skills they implemented in the development of the design ideas. So measuring the space, how they work with performers, selecting suitable materials, creating a model. So everything that we've looked at today is what they're going to be doing. They can do it in component 2 and component 3. The presentation in component 3 is not meant to be a repeat of the ideas log. So hopefully you can see the difference now between the two. In terms of the evaluation, students taking design who don't have the work realized in performance can reflect on how well the design would have supported the performance. They reflect on how it would have created atmosphere, communicated themes, etc. As always, students can also consider what they would do differently next time. Okay, so I hope that's clear. In terms of useful websites and resources, the ones that I've got here, I just wanted to show you really quickly because I think you'll like them. So the first one is the National Theatre, and I presume that you already know about the National Theatre's resources, the stuff, but this is incredible about how they designed and made the costumes. And again, it's obviously not level 2, and your level 2 students won't be doing it, but just to be able to see the process, like I'll just show you really quickly. I realise that the quality of it on your screen isn't very good, so I've stopped it there. The next one is stage lighting for students. This is like a proper encyclopedia of different things that you can find, and it goes into different areas. It's got sound on there. It's got various tutorials and references and archives, so that's really good. This one is the Royal Court resource packs. And in this one in particular, cutting it, it's got, this is about FGM, oh, horrible, but it's got recordings with designers. So the set designer, it's got like a 10-minute film there, and it's got details of what she did. And there's also a sound designer interview there, 12 minutes with her and ideas, and then lighting design as well. So they've got loads of useful stuff on their website for designers. And then this is from Matthew Bourne's website from New Adventures, which is they've got lighting design here as well, and interviews with various people. There's also, by the way, we've got the V&A, we've got the British Council, the British Library. They've got some really good stuff. These 3 books you could use because one is about how to design for theatre, the fundamentals of it, the makeup artist handbook. You know, this is really good stuff. Alice has said Hairspray, Shake and Shimmy edition has videos for all the design elements too. Thank you, that's excellent. Kate has asked, is this step-by-step guide available online? It isn't yet, but I'm going to put it on. Holly's asked, do you think in component 2 it's too big to ask it to work on the lighting for all 3 groups in one? Better focus on one group's extract. I think, depending on the type of work that they're doing, I think one group might be enough, but play it by ear. You can always email me your questions as well, by the way. So we need your help. If you are lots of you asked for help with this, and it's like, oh, can we have some examples of student work? We haven't got any, because the ones that we have we can't use. So would you like to help us? Please help us. If you want to, could you email me and say, I'm doing this work, I've never done it before, but I'd like to help you generate some work for component 1 or for component 2 or whatever it would be, or for component 3 using the SAMs or the additional SAMs. Please, that would just be incredible if you could. I look forward to receiving all your emails. We've got the Facebook group, which is BTEC Performing Arts Sharing Good Practice. If you're not already on there, join. Get on there, share these ideas. I'm going to put these up on there as well, so that you've got places to go, so you're not worried now, oh my god, I can't remember where he said all these resources were. Those are my details there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope it's been useful. I'm sorry if it's freaked some of you out. Thank you, Sam, for your loads of resources for Curious Incident. It's brilliant, and really good ones on design. Thank you. Good luck with everything. I hope that all your students do extraordinarily well in this. As I said, I will make all this stuff available on the website as soon as possible and on the Facebook group. For now, thank you so much. I'll say goodbye. Have lovely evenings until the next time. Goodbye.